If you didn't know, I have a background as a speedrunner spanning as far as Generations Ultimate, but I didn't start uploading my runs until Rise. During my many years gathering knowledge and improving my gameplay, I discovered different universal techniques that are effective across all player skill levels. Today, in preparations for Wilds, I'd love to share a portion of those techniques with you so that you can elevate your gameplay. But first, if you haven't watched my previous videos, I highly recommend watching my System Mechanics video, hopefully it's still titled that, as we'll be lightly touching on those subjects. My name is Monster Hunter, and it's okay to be bad at something, so long as you don't give up on improving. There exists a concept in Tekken that can be translated to any game called Small Tekken and Big Tekken. Small Tekken is the act of using minor attacks and movements with little risk to achieve small advantages. This can be seen as jabs, strings, sidesteps, pokes, defense, and punishes that won't lead to anything enormous, but rather create the situation that you're looking for. Big Tekken is just balls to the wall, high risk, heavy read gameplay that gives major advantages but equal disadvantages. With all that said, there exists Small Monster Hunter and Big Monster Hunter, and each has fundamentals that can be applied in different ways at any skill level. Those fundamentals include monster knowledge, weapon knowledge, positioning, and attack behavior. Monster knowledge is the understanding of a monster's systems from their attacks to their hit zones and even their flinch thresholds. You're not expected to learn this all in just one hunt, as it can take several hunts before you truly master a monster. When researching a monster, you want to learn its attacks, its attack triggers, unique mechanics, damage reactions, and weaknesses, among many other things. By doing so, you can begin to commit those to memory and finding ways to take advantage of them. We'll be using Nargacuga from Sunbreak as the example monster for this entire video. You want to figure out 4 key details when fighting a monster. What are its weak zones? What are its attacks and why does it use them? What is the monster's unique mechanic and what are the damage reactions? Weak zones are relatively easy to understand as they are the parts that have the most hit bars, damage numbers are either large or orange, and the part doesn't cause you to bounce. Once you figure out what its weak zones are, you'll be able to formulate a game plan around attacking those parts. For Nargacuga, its head and tail are the weakest spots. There are 2 ways to figure out and retain knowledge about a monster's moveset. You can either passively observe the monster by standing at different distances and allowing it to go buck wild, or you can learn through trial by fire, which is essentially learning as you go. The point of this is to understand when a monster does certain actions to know what your openings are and how long you have. You have to consider how close or far you are from the monster and their current state. Let's make a comparison between 2 of Nargacuga's attacks, the Radial Tail Whip and the Tail Slam. The Radial Tail Whip sees Nargacuga take up a posture before spinning. Once it's over, it will always have a recovery animation where it lifts its head up. This would be considered your opening if you can dodge or guard it successfully, allowing you a small window of opportunity to attack. The Tail Slam sees Nargacuga enter a bracing posture, turning its back to the player and jumping in the air to slam its tail down. After doing so, it will be stuck in the ground for a couple seconds. Once it recovers, it will immediately get back to the action and use another move. This brief period where its tail is stuck in the ground is the only time you have to attack, but the window is much smaller and more difficult to capitalize on than the Radial Tail Whip. Watch out for universal and monster-specific mechanics such as Enrage or Altered States. Nargacuga's Rage changes how these attacks work. The Radial Tail Sweep now has a chance to use an additional Tail Whip. Despite this, it will still have a recovery animation at the end. The Tail Slam, however, is always guaranteed to have a follow-up and it will attempt to jump to the left of its intended target and slam again. The window of opportunity is the same, but it's designed to catch you off guard for the first time you see it, or if you're not paying attention to the conditions of the fight. Let's move on to its damage reactions. Flinching the head, torso, forelegs, and tail has a simple stagger animation where it either presses down or dramatically reels. However, if you flinch the hind legs once, Nargacuga will fall over. This is not common, as the hind legs are not a part you would focus on. Breaking the head will cause a flinch animation. Severing the tail causes it to fall forward and get up immediately, and breaking the Cutwing causes Nargacuga to topple. This part is different from its foreleg, as they are different parts. By dealing enough damage to the wing arm, after it's been broken, you'll be able to topple Nargacuga. A unique topple mechanic for Nargacuga is that by flinching its head 4 times, it will be toppled. Something else to note, monster topples have unique times associated with them, where one monster may be down for 8 seconds, another could be toppled for 15. It depends on the situation and the part. With this knowledge, you should be attempting to force a situation that is favorable for you by building up to that moment. Let's say Nargacuga does its radial tail sweep. You're more than likely going to try and attack the head. This could lead to a flinch, which would make it one step easier to get that head topple later. Without trying to overwhelm you, you want to learn the ins and outs of a monster to better prepare yourself for how you should be responding and what you're looking for, figuring out where and how to dodge, where and when you should attack, what moves you should use, what part you should hit, why a monster attacks or acts the way it does. These are all crucial to understand before you start getting into how you should behave. The Fighting Glossary defines a matchup as the strategy and game knowledge that applies for one specific character against another specific character. Applying that to Monster Hunter is your strategy against the monster depending on your weapon. Not every matchup is a total loss, as your ability to perform certain actions in your toolkit can be used to take advantage of a monster's openings. Unfavorable matchups, like Greatsword versus Nargacuga, or Dual Blades versus Rathalos, are due to the weapon and monster interaction. Nargacuga moves a lot, and that troubles Greatsword's slow mobility and attack, while Rathalos flies a lot, which complicates the hunt due to Dual Blade's short range. Understanding what your weapon is capable of, and how you can utilize those features against certain monsters is equally as important as knowing the monster itself. If you're fighting Nargacuga with the Greatsword, you already know there's the difference in speed. Yes, True Charge Slash is your strongest attack. No, you shouldn't throw it out or fiend for it 24/7. You have to build up toward being able to use it or understand the monster's openings and preemptively use the attack. This section isn't too long, but the most important thing to understand about your weapon is what your best attacks in certain situations are, what your combo routes are, and how to use each attack effectively. Keep these aspects in mind. How long does it take to use an attack and recover from it? What recovery options do you have, such as evade canceling or comboing into another move? And what your strongest or most effective combo is. Movement is a major aspect of Monster Hunter, as your ability to traverse the battlefield is almost as important as your ability to attack. Positioning in Monster Hunter is the act of moving to a location where you can either preemptively or reactively dodge, prepare, or attack a monster. It is a difficult skill to acquire, as this positioning is not universal and demands you have monster knowledge to pull it off. There are many ways to position yourself in certain scenarios. There's walking or running, evading into place, or attack move, which would be using an attack that can act as a mobility tool. Let's bring back the Nargacuga radial tail sweep and use each aforementioned technique with the Greatsword. My goal is to hit Nargacuga's head, so we'll make sure that we not only avoid the attack, but also get to hit it. If your weapon is drawn, you can evade at the last second into the attack. From there, you can walk or evade and tackle into the hit, thus moving forward to where I need to be and getting my attack off. If your weapon is sheathed, you can exit the range of the attack before running back in to land your own hit. There's no need to Superman dive here, as it would only consume time unless you know without a shadow of a doubt that you're going to get hit. There are many examples I could use, but what you have to take away from this is knowing where you want to be in order to dodge a monster attack and or deliver an attack of your own. Safely, by the way. If you overcommit, you're basically cooked and either leaving yourself vulnerable or missing out on another opportunity. Remember what I said, small Tekken, big Tekken. For the final section, I'll be covering attack behavior. Look, let's be honest with ourselves. A lot of you tend to attack in moments where it's completely unnecessary. You see a microscopic window of opportunity called death awaits, and you decide that you're an expert cave diver. This is either because you don't know, don't care to know, or just mashing and hoping something happens. Meanwhile, more experienced players that aren't high level will have some idea of what's happening, but not how to make those things happen. I consulted Juzzi on these matters just to verify that I was on the right track, and for those of you who might be washing dishes or left this up on a second monitor, there's a text conversation on screen now. I'm not reading it out loud, but most of this video is a summary of that. We're going to cover commitment, poking, punishing, setups, attack fishing, and damage reaction abuse. Certain player attacks require little to no drawbacks, while others outright rob time from you to not only perform, but also recover from. There's a huge difference between Charge Blade sword attacks and Axe mode amped elemental discharge. The sword attacks can be evade cancelled, or you can remain neutral and choose to walk or prepare for what comes next by evading or guarding. With the AED, the startup frames, attack speed, and recovery time combine to make for a high commitment attack that can pay off in some circumstances, not all. You cannot rip an AED at any and all times. Do not perform a high commitment attack unless you are absolutely certain of the payoff, such as an expected flinch or a large enough opening made by either you or the monster, and maybe in some very fringe cases, you attack while they're attacking and you're safe because they either did a move that does flinch or due to the fact that you just barely pushed past that monster's hitbox. Poking is when you use small attacks during a monster's brief window that will leave you safe to react to the monster's next action or build up toward a particular mechanic. This is usually done after the monster uses an attack it can quickly recover from, or is starting up a move or action that you can take advantage of. Dual Blades in Sword and Shield are an excellent example for this, as they can deliver love taps before reacting quickly and continuing to slowly chip during the monster's actions. Punishing is when you can freely attack the monster during a small opportunity, such as a monster recovering from an attack. These are bigger windows, but there are small punishes and big punishes, but we'll go with the big example. After Nargacuga uses its tail slam, it is left vulnerable until it pulls its tail out of the ground. An optimal punish for Charge Blade would be to block the attack and immediately SAED, as this allows for you to pull off a high commitment attack or combo safely in that period of time. You're looking to do as much damage in that small window that won't have negative repercussions, so make sure you memorize what attacks leave monsters vulnerable and know what your weapon's attacks are to better coordinate these split-second or large window moments of opportunity. Setups can be seen as positioning setups and scenario setups. Positioning setups are when you position yourself in anticipation of an attack, in response to an attack, or to successfully dodge an attack and be properly positioned to retaliate. Scenario setups can be forcing certain conditions and cashing out on them later. If you've seen my previous videos, you're aware of how I treat Rathian. By dealing enough damage to her head while she is incapacitated, or by hit counting and standing in a certain proximity to engage her tail flip, I can then flinch her head for the knockdown and repeat the process. That is both positioning setup and scenario setup, as I have to just barely reach the head flinch threshold, stand at a distance where the tail flip is more likely to happen, position myself by walking or evading to where Rathian's head will be, and capitalizing on the flinch. Like I just mentioned, attack fishing is when you stand at certain distances from the monster to force likelihood of an attack. Monster attacks are all random and dependent on their current state and distance from the player. If you stand too far, monsters are more likely to do ranged attacks or full screen charges. It's self-explanatory, but it requires you to know your positioning and how to not only incite the attack, but also have a response to said attack. Damage reaction abuse, stagger locking, head locking, threshold counting, hit counting, it has many names. Basically, you either count the damage you're dealing or understand the routine of your attacks in order to create a favorable situation in the future. I previously mentioned the Rathian as the air topple example, but let's use Nargacuga again. Flinching or breaking Nargacuga's Cutwing causes a topple. Once toppled, if I deal just enough damage to where it'll reach the threshold again when it recovers, I can topple it again. This is workable on every monster so long as you have the knowledge and the damage to perform it. Okay, I really hope this wasn't too much to understand. I tried my best in dumbing down a lot of these concepts to make them digestible and easily practiced before WoW's release. Anyway, I have a lot of prep to do before this game comes out, and I hope that when this is seen in the future, that it helps many of you, and hopefully I get it on the Thursday before the game comes out. So, until next time.